A Canadian school board identifies problematic authors. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. What we'll talk about today symbolizes where Canada is at culturally, at least in some places and perhaps a growing number of places around the country. So, the Globe and Mail reports that the organizer of a book club for teenage girls says she was told students from the Toronto District School Board, that's the school board in question here, would not attend one of her events because the featured author, a lawyer named Marie Hennion, had defended Jian Ghomeshi on sexual assault charges. And actually, the school board did this on multiple occasions, but we'll talk about this first one right now. So, the book club, it's called A Room of Your Own, and it invites teenage girls, many of whom come from low-income families, to read a text and then discuss it virtually with the author. It's quite the good experience, and the school board has been a partner with this book club for a while. They have a track record. They've had no problems up until recently. The school board's role really is that the principals and the teachers will promote the events to the students. They'll say, hey, we're affiliated with this book club. Here is next month's event. You should check it out. Now, the book club was told in late October by the school board superintendent at the Toronto District School Board that they would not promote this particular monthly event, the one with the lawyer, Marie Hennion. And when asked, well, why is that? She was told that the school board's equity department felt that the lawyer would send the wrong message. First of all, pause there. An equity department. Are you surprised that that's where the issue stemmed from? Is something like that truly a necessary usage of tax dollars? These are questions that have to be put out there. So, now the founder or the owner of this book club said that they told her straight out that they will not have any sort of affiliation with that particular event, simply due to the fact that the lawyer defended Jian Ghomeshi, and they said, quote for quote, apparently, how do you explain that to little girls? How do you explain this lawyer doing her job? If she defended someone who was accused of sexual assault, we can't have you here talking to students. Now, this really is profoundly silly. They're asking, well, how do you explain that to little girls? Well, it actually is quite easy to explain that to not only little girls, but to people in general. We live in a free society that values the rule of law. An accusation is not synonymous with a verdict. There is a jury, there is due process, and you are presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And why is that important? Because we don't want to arbitrarily detain people and ruin their lives without being sure. We don't want a ruling entity, like the government, to have the power to put you behind bars for any reason they see fit. We don't want activists to have that power either. We want fair trials. We want an attempt at getting to the truth. And an accusation is grounds for that, for having a trial. But it's not grounds for declaring someone guilty or not. And you better be thankful for that. That's one thing that separates Canada from something like 60% of the rest of the world. As a key figure in the education system, this superintendent really has me at a loss for words. If she can't articulate why innocence until proven guilty, why the rule of law is important, if that can be explained to students at their school, I do wonder what exactly is going on there and where the mental block is rising. This is just nonsense. It wasn't even like this female lawyer, the author of the book in question that the school board is protesting against, it wasn't even like they have an issue with the contents of the actual book. They're simply mad that Ghomeshi had a lawyer and this lady was that lawyer. What are they protesting against? The structure of our legal system? It's a big question mark there for me. Now, the cherry on top really is that the legal situation, the Ghomeshi case that the school board is citing here, it turned out that Jian Ghomeshi was actually found not guilty anyways. Now, that's not the same as saying he didn't do it. It's just that it couldn't be proved beyond a reasonable doubt in court. He may have not done it. He may have. But this is the verdict in the eyes of the law. So it's not even like she defended a guilty sexual assault perpetrator. She defended someone who was presumed innocent in the eyes of the court. So that further compounds this question here. What exactly are they protesting against? And this lady, the lawyer, her book is highly regarded. I looked it up. It has great reviews, and it isn't even about Ghomeshi. In fact, from what I've seen based on the reviews, it takes a very woman-centered perspective on the world. It tries to empower women, to explain some of the challenges of the legal system and her profession, and it has good stuff in it. So it is just such a confused stance that the school board took in regards to this. It's a book club primarily for young girls. You have a powerful woman leadership figure, this lawyer, and she's talking about being a woman in that position, the challenges that she faced, all things that could be valuable to your audience, but simply because during the course of her career, she successfully defended someone who was accused of a sexual crime. Now you want to effectively cancel that? Come on now. The lawyer, the author, did nothing wrong. In fact, it seems like all that's happened here is an attribution of group guilt, since she was associated as the defense attorney for this individual, Ghomeshi, who, once again, I have to explain, was found not guilty. Simply due to that, she has some type of stain on her now. This is such a ridiculous standard. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion here, it's not the first time that the school board and that superintendent had a run-in with a controversial, if you want to call it, book event. So that same superintendent, Helen Fisher, also told her students that they would not participate in a book club event scheduled for February with Nadia Murad, who is a Nobel Prize winner and an activist. Now, why would someone like that have her event barred by the Toronto District School Board? Well, they cited a concern with that book. It's called The Last Girl, My Story of Captivity and My Fight Against the Islamic State. They thought this would foster Islamophobia. Now, all you have to do is look at the author's background to understand how preposterous of a claim that is. Nadia Murad, the Nobel Prize winner and the author in question who was going to have this talk, was kidnapped by ISIS. She was enslaved. She was beaten. She was raped. And now, after escaping all of that, she explains why she's fighting against radicalism and helping women and children who are victimized by genocide, mass atrocities, and human traffickers. That's her mission. That's her goal. That's the message that she has coming from a true story. Something that would be interesting, I would assume, to the students to learn about. We talk about culture and all that. Well, let's learn about how women have it around the world. Compare how our situation is in Canada to what Nadia has been through. That insight could be quite powerful in shaping perspectives. But this apparently is not a legitimate conversation to be having because they fear. The school board is under the impression that, well, this is going to make people afraid of Muslims, but that's not even what the book is about. And this is actually quite interesting because there was a response given to the school board. They said that clearly what the author is talking about is the Islamic State. It is a terrorist organization. We're talking about ISIS here. If simply talking about the true actions of that group gets shut down on the grounds of Islamophobia, how can we have any conversation about extremism at all? And I like this part here. The closing note of that brief said the Toronto District School Board should be aware of the difference between talking about everyday Muslims and a group like ISIS, and this lady, Nadia, telling her story about how she was captured and treated extremely poorly by that group. Now, I'll pose this question back to the school board. How do you explain that to the girls in your school? That was basically the reason why they shut down that lawyer's talk. How do you explain to them now, as the superintendent, that you are willing to sweep the treatment of Nadia and other women under the hands of extremists like ISIS under the rug because you're afraid of potential impressions that the story might make? So you're going to downplay her suffering? You're effectively going to say it's not worth talking about? How silly. On one hand, the school board tries to put up this image that they care about women, but when a woman comes here with a real story of suffering and to share information about how, a large cohort of women around the world are dealing with things like human trafficking and whatnot, oh, you don't want to talk about it anymore. That's insane, really. Now, there might be a case to make that the children could be too young to hear about that, but I really don't buy that, honestly. I don't presume Nadia is going to go into graphic detail about what happened to her while ISIS was doing, I don't even want to say it, doing the atrocities that they committed. But you can explain to them how certain groups, certain processes like human trafficking are negatively impacting disproportionately women around the world, and how in Canada these things might be rare, but that's certainly not the case for women around the world. And knowing about that is important. But here we are putting equity considerations above all of that, which isn't itself a contradiction. So anyways, after this sort of backlash from the community and the authors, the superintendent sent the complainant a copy of the school board's policy on selecting equitable, there's that term again, culturally relevant and responsive reading materials. Now, this is another question that I have. Is she saying then that these two books in question are not equitable? You'd have to explain that to me. Are they not culturally relevant? Are they not responsive? They use a lot of fancy buzzwords that really don't have much meaning behind them. They have to explain themselves. What are they even talking about? What is this criteria? And how is it limiting and selecting for books that can and cannot be talked about? So, people found that response pretty weak, rightfully so. And it is just funny to me. Some of these people in positions of power think that an equity statement or your policy is going to be the eraser that wipes away any issues. No. If your policy is lunacy, it's going to continue to be called out, and that's what happened here. After pressure from the public, the school board said, after speaking with staff, quote unquote, there appears to have been a misunderstanding, as the equity department actually does not review and approve books for the book clubs. So, after all of this happens, they're saying, oh, it was a misunderstanding. Clearly not. This went on for time. They were showing that multiple events. It was a process in place here to approve things. Now, you can say the equity department shouldn't have been doing that, but the fact is, that's what happened. These DIE notions got wrapped up in real-world issues. They touched reality, and people realized, well, they weren't making much sense to begin with. The school board realizes that they're caught in an incompatible message game here, where they purport to be fighting for this, but they're caught shutting down that, and their mission's being called into question. So they're trying to throw the smokescreen of, oh, we were confused, it was a misunderstanding. But truly, it's not an acceptable response. They have to carefully analyze themselves and see what they've become. This is no simple mistake. It's a sign of the times, and we're talking about the Toronto District School Board here. But if you don't think similar things are happening across the country, and across multiple countries actually, then you'd be mistaken. Education has, in some ways, been infected by far-left ideas. And this is the truth. Woke notions have infiltrated systems and facilities that we used to rely on, whether it's media, science, in some cases. And I keep going back to how, when I say science, I'm not talking about people actually doing the equation. I'm talking about the messaging. Simply go back to last summer, where the scientists or the spokesperson for them, on their behalf, were applauding things like the race protests that were happening, but they were condemning the anti-mask ones. How does that make any sense? Something like COVID-19 does not care about why you're gathering in massive groups. It's either you don't condone them or you do. You can't pick and choose based on the cause. The infusion of politics into these institutions has been a disaster. And we're seeing that play out here. The Toronto District School Board clearly knows they're in the wrong. If you simply look at the evidence here, they're not willing to put up a fight. They've already put out the cascading smokescreen. They're saying it was a misunderstanding. We're going to review our policies, blah, 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 blah. They know they have no leg to stand on. And if we're talking about broader solutions here, in some ways that's what has to happen across the board. You have to raise opposition. You have to question these policies. You have to debate them. You have to talk about them. And you have to expose the ideological flaws and convince enough people that the path that we're seemingly heading down isn't the most productive. It's not to say that DIE principles have no place in the world. Diversity, inclusion, equity. Sure, there are instances where it's called for, but should these be the primary lenses that we view everything through? That's the question. And that's the defining problem, I feel, of the current generation. Do we continue to double down on arbitrary characteristics of oneself, or do we try to move past that? That's something for you to think about. You surely cannot have it both ways. Going down one path or the other is going to move you further away from the alternative that you have forsaken. So, when determining what the end game is, try to loop these ideas into that vision and act accordingly. And that's really our way out of this, to just talk and debate and let the best ideas flourish. And that's becoming more and more challenging, but we have to continue to strive for that and hold ourselves to a high standard. Otherwise, degradation is right around the corner. So, with that, it now brings us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.